From your first meetup and date over a cup of coffee to that first sip that kicks off your day, coffee is one of those little things that makes life feel a little more special and worth it. But have you ever stopped to wonder how that cup of instant coffee gets to you? Join me as we discover how instant coffee is made in one of these giant factories. But before all that, how in the world did people start drinking coffee? Well, coffee has a pretty cool backstory that just might shock you. It all started in Ethiopia, where, as the story goes, a goat herder named Kaldi noticed his goats acting super energetic after munching on some coffee beans. Fast forward to the 15th century, and Sufi monks absolutely loved it because it helped them stay awake and focused during long prayers. Yeah, from there, coffee spread like wildfire across the Middle East and eventually to Europe. By the 18th century, coffee was a big deal in the West. After the American Revolutionary War, tea lost its popularity, so coffee had a chance to shine. These days, coffee is more than just something you sip, it's a lifestyle. But then there's Nestlé, which completely changed the game. In 1938, they launched Nescafe, the first instant coffee that was easy to make and still tasted great. It became a lifesaver for busy families and even soldiers during World War II. Later in the 1960s, they improved it even more with freeze-dried coffee to keep the flavor intact. Nestlé's leads the instant coffee world, brewing up an incredible 1 billion cups every single day. It's found in every home, making coffee quick, tasty, and part of everyday life for you and me. So let's look into how it's exactly made. It all starts with the hard work of over 100,000 farmers in coffee-growing countries like Brazil and Vietnam. Together, they supply more than 13 million bags of coffee beans to Nestlé's 24 factories around the world. Turning these coffee cherries into the coffee we drink every day isn't easy, but it's a process that makes every sip worth it. The process begins with coffee plants that bloom with beautiful, fragrant white flowers, but these flowers only last a few days. Over the next 6 to 9 months, those flowers turn into bright red cherries, signaling the beans inside are ready. Farmers have to pay close attention to the plants because timing is everything. When about 95% of the cherries are red, with just a few green ones left, it's finally time to harvest. On some smaller farms, coffee cherries are still picked by hand, but that takes a lot of time and money. Bigger farms use special machines to get the job done faster and more efficiently. These machines shake branches to harvest cherries efficiently, reducing manual labor. Thanks to this technology, farmers can harvest up to 60 bags of cherries in only about 5 hours, a job that used to take days by hand. After being harvested, the coffee cherries are loaded onto conveyor belts and moved into hoppers for temporary storage. From there, tractors transport them to the wet mill, where the real transformation begins, usually within 8 to 12 hours of picking. At the wet mill, the cherries are poured into a large hopper and guided to a gravity separator, which is basically a water tank that sorts the ripe cherries from the unripe ones. The ripe cherries, which are heavier and packed with flavor, sink to the bottom, while the lighter, unripe ones float to the top and are removed or used for other purposes. Next, the cherries roll over rotating drums with rough surfaces. These drums gently press the cherries against fixed plates, peeling away the juicy pulp and revealing the coffee beans inside. The separated skins don't go to waste. They're often repurposed as compost to enrich the soil on the farm. Once the beans are free from their skins, they're still covered in a slimy layer called mucilage. To remove it, the beans are placed in fermentation tanks over 12 to 24 hours, where the water naturally breaks down the mucilage. Farmers start by checking the beans by hand, feeling their surface to ensure the sticky layer has softened enough. Once everything looks good, fresh water is added to the tank to completely submerge the beans again. Using a long wooden tool, the farmer stirs the beans vigorously. This scrubbing action helps remove the mucilage and leaves behind a clean, protective parchment layer on the beans. The tank is drained and refilled with fresh water, and the process is repeated until the beans are spotless. After washing, the beans are spread out to dry. They're laid on flat surfaces, often on parchment or drying beds, and sometimes shaded to protect them from unexpected weather. Farmers regularly rake the beans throughout the day to ensure they dry evenly. This drying stage lasts about 1 to 2 weeks depending on the weather, until the beans reach the... Once dried, the beans are ready for the next step, hulling. In the hulling machine, the tough parchment layer is carefully removed, finally revealing the green coffee beans that will soon be roasted and brewed into the coffee we all love. After hulling, the coffee beans, now called green coffee beans, are prepped for storage. They're cleaned, sorted for quality, and packed into 60-kilogram jute or CLE bags. Each bag is labeled with details like the origin and grade of the beans, making it easy to trace where they came from. These bags are then stored in ventilated warehouses to keep the beans fresh and safe from pests or moisture until they're ready to head to the Nescafe factory. When the bags arrive at the Nestlé factory, a robotic arm fitted with a spider-like gripper carefully lifts each heavy bag from the trailer and places it onto an extendable conveyor belt. This system is not only efficient, but also protects workers from potential back injuries caused by lifting such heavy loads. As the bags move along the conveyor, other robotic arms push them into position. The bags then pass over a moisture sensor, which checks their humidity levels. If a bag doesn't meet the ideal level, it's automatically rejected and set aside. For quality control, a robotic probe also randomly takes samples from some bags as they pass by. Accepted bags are stacked onto pallets by another set of robotic arms, and the pallets are weighed to ensure consistency before moving on to the next stage. Before roasting begins, the bags of green coffee beans are opened, and the beans are poured into a sifting machine. This machine vibrates to remove any leftover debris or broken beans, ensuring that only the best beans move forward. With this final quality check complete, the beans are ready for roasting, the step where their rich flavors and aromas truly come to life. Before the coffee beans are roasted, they face the ultimate test, a taste test by human experts. These tasters, with their super sharp taste buds, sample up to 100 cups of brewed coffee daily to make sure the flavor is perfect. They can pick up even the tiniest flavor differences because in coffee, one bad bean can ruin the whole batch. It's a job that takes skill, patience, and a genuine love for coffee. Once the beans pass this strict quality check, they move on to roasting. Roasting is where the beans develop their rich aroma and bold flavor. They're poured into a double-walled rotating drum with paddles to keep the beans moving constantly to roast them evenly without burning. Here's an interesting fact. Roasting time affects caffeine levels. Lighter roasts, which spend less time in the drum, retain more caffeine, while darker roasts lose some caffeine but gain a stronger, bolder flavor. After roasting, the beans are cooled in a large tray. Powerful fans blow air from below while rotating arms gently stir the beans. This cooling process takes 5 to 10 minutes, stopping the roasting process and locking in their flavor. Once cooled, the beans are sent to an industrial coffee mill, where they're ground into a coarse powder. This powder is brewed into a concentrated coffee extract using steam and pressure. Next comes the drying stage, where the liquid extract is transformed into instant coffee. For Nescafe Original, the extract is spray-dried. It's sprayed into a massive dryer through a high-pressure nozzle, creating a fine mist of coffee droplets. At the same time, scorching hot air at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit blows through the dryer at 400 miles per hour, evaporating the moisture instantly. What's left are tiny coffee particles that settle at the bottom, ready to become the instant coffee you know and love. For Nescafe Gold, the process becomes even more refined with freeze drying, a method designed to lock in every bit of the coffee's flavor and aroma. The coffee is frozen, broken into granules, and sublimated to preserve flavor. By the time the extract exits the freezing hall, it is transformed into a long, solid sheet of coffee ice. The sheet is then fed into a machine with rotating blades that shatter it into tiny frozen granules. The frozen granules proceed to the final and most critical step: sublimation. They're spread onto large tray-like sheets and placed inside a low-pressure chamber. Here, the granules are gently heated to 140 degrees Fahrenheit for about 5 hours. In this unique environment, the remaining frozen moisture in the granules skips the liquid phase entirely, turning directly into vapor. This process preserves the coffee's aroma and flavor while leaving behind perfectly dry granules. An internal vacuum then removes the vapor, leaving the granules stable and packed with flavor. Once freeze-dried, the coffee granules are ready for packaging. They're deposited into large storage sacks and sent down a conveyor belt for jar filling. The jars whiz by at incredible speed, each filled in under a second.